and it's called CBITS, right? And so we went out and raised money for CBITS. We did a little small pilot of that CBITS at Roger Williams Middle School over on South Side, Lower South. And it was okay, it was good. We had a clinician in there, and the clinician worked with youth. And a lot of what we thought was validated, right? There's great opportunity, there's great assets, but there's also great struggle, right? And the not surprising thing was like, that struggle affects how students learn on a day-to-day basis, right? This group knows that, you all know that, right? But some of our decision makers don't always know that and don't always keep that in the front of their minds when they're thinking about what student success looks like. What are the real barriers, right, that students face every single day that impede their road to achievement, success, opportunity, all those things? If our children and youth aren't well, right, that's our top priority, right? And there's struggle, right? And there's real struggle. And so we fast forward, right? So a lot of this deals with expertise, how I treat expertise and think about expertise. Expertise doesn't come out of books and lectures, right? It comes out of experience. So the artist behind me and the amazing clinician behind me, who you'll hear her story tonight in the artist stories, it's not about where they went to school, and it's not about how they perform on tests and those sorts of things, but it's about their experience and how they can support other folks who have gone through the same thing, right? So we prioritize the Children and Youth Cabinet in making sure that clinicians are clinicians of color. We want to make sure that we have artists of color. We want to make sure that they're pretty close in age, right? They're not middle school students behind me, but they're pretty close in age, right? We've got to make clear connections. We've got to have students connecting with the folks who are in front of them to the best of our ability, because those connections matter. So in 2016, myself and my partner in work had an idea. We're like, you know, let's just start punching at something that we think is really important, right? So that little test we did at Roger Williams was okay, but it wasn't good enough, right? So we pitched this big idea to Everett, who had hosted us a couple times. We pitched it to groups like the Providence Center and Vanna and others. We're like, let's build something. Let's push it all into the middle. Let's take the experiences of young artists who are from our communities. Let's find our clinicians of color who share some of the experiences of the youth in the room that they're trying to support, who have experienced some of that trauma, and let's go big, right? So we went big and people listened, right? So in 2016, we were awarded a federal grant for about $2 million to support this work over 5 years. And the folks behind me took an idea, right? And they made it come alive, right? So I work with the folks behind me on a regular basis, right? They run groups for kids, youth who are in school who have PTSD. We have youth who have PTSD in our schools, right? This group knows that. Not all of our groups know that. Not all of our decision makers know that, right? And so we've got a lot of work ahead of us. They'll talk about the work they do on a day-to-day basis, and some of my role is to make sure that this good work gets lifted up, right? So that the people who do make the decisions better understand that in some places, 90% of our students have experienced loss of a loved one. 90% of our students have experienced loss of a loved one. Where are they grieving, right? Where can they grieve? Where does that happen, right? So that's what these folks do. They create those spaces, right? They create those spaces. Instead of calling it a behavior issue with a student who gets referred for a discipline referral to school because they're anxious, right? Because they're thinking about something they saw or something they've been through. They're anxious, they can't sit still. Maybe they didn't sleep well the night before, so that affects them in the classroom, right? But they're not disrespectful, right? They're not disobedient, they're not a behavior issue, but their struggle is real, right? They are not being supported in the way they need to be supported to succeed. And that's what these folks are here to talk about tonight in part, right? Stories are democratizing, right? And you'll hear their stories. They put us in a place where we weren't before. And every day when this team, who is part of a larger team, goes into schools and starts to work with students on telling their stories, healing happens, right? And so it's my job to take all of the hard work that they're doing here and start to push on our leaders and say, you know what? You can demand third grade reading, you can demand math proficiency, you can demand all those things, but until you're focusing on how well our students are as a whole, we're not gonna get there. We're just not gonna get there. And so I'm amazed by the work that goes on by the folks behind me on a day-to-day basis. They've turned an idea into 60 students served in the first year, into 260 students served currently, and that growth model will continue, right? So they push me, go raise more money, go get me more resources so we can do it better, right? But people are starting to listen, right? And the last thing I'll say is like, rooms like you all, who intuitively understand why this is important, have to help us, right? Spread that message. Spread the messages that you'll see behind us tonight. Spread the messages to why they're important. And demand our leaders to better understand the lives of the children and youth who are in our schools, because they must if they're gonna succeed in the way they're asking them to. So I could go on and on and on. But it's not my story, it's their story, right? So this is where the magic happens. This is where it all happens, is behind me, the folks behind me. And folks like Vanna and Joseph and others, and the whole crew. They put it on the line every day, right? They put their own experiences on the line. They share their own experiences to connect with kids who are living through the same thing. So we can give them a paycheck, right? But they're doing a lot more than that. And I know you know that. But we're not gonna get to where we need to get to unless we have more folks like these in our schools, right? Who are welcome and embraced to support the basic needs of our children and youth, who some are not well right now. And we've got to get better at doing that. So, thank you very much. Where do I pivot this to?
Me.
Back to Aaron. Thank you, Aaron.
So when Matt approached us about being part of the Building Trauma Sensitive Schools Initiative, we were very excited. We feel at Everett that we've been preparing for this work for a very long time, and we believe it's so important. Everett's been around for 32 years, and we didn't start out looking for trauma, but it found us. Back in 2010, we did an early Brain Café, and we had Mark Gapin from the Trauma Center in Boston come down, and he told us that there's more young people growing up in our neighborhoods with PTSD and filling our jails than all of the veterans coming back from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan combined. And that really resonated with what we have seen with our students here at Everett. And we've, from the very beginning, been helping them process their stories of trauma through theater and dance. And in fact, it's one of the things that sort of drove us to look into brain science, because we saw so many kids with anger issues or anxiety or depression or ADHD, all things that we know now are also symptoms of trauma exposure. And we were like, how can we help them more effectively? And we were hoping to learn something through the research that we did. And actually one of the things that's exciting to us about the current state of brain research is that the emotions are starting to be considered a serious area of study. In fact, it's recognized now that they actually drive our decision making. And so as actors and dancers and theater artists, we also study the emotions very deeply. And we believe that you have to have access to a full range of emotions in order to be able to develop healthy relationships. And that's really what we want for our young people. But the most important thing we bring to this work, as Matt was talking about, is the team of diverse, dedicated young artists who come from the same neighborhoods as the students they're serving. They share a lived experience which makes them very relatable. They've spent years at Everett honing their artistic talents and developing their teaching skills. They've gone through the CBITS training alongside the clinicians, and for the past 2 years, they've partnered with us in figuring out what is the best way to bring theater integration into this CBITS curriculum. And we're really excited about what we've all come up with together. We feel like it's working really well. And in just a few minutes, they're going to come up and introduce themselves and share what they've been doing in the schools. But right now, I'm going to just bring my mother and co-artistic director to the stage, Dorothy Jungles, and she's going to introduce Vanna, who will be our next speaker.
Hi, Vanna.
Hi.
Vanna is known for many things at the school, right? One of them is
Her brownies.
another one,
Open door.
open doors.
Her listening skills and her doors decorated with flowers that like shoot out into the hallway. It's crazy.
Arts and crafts, colors, brightness, everything you could imagine comes from Vanna. And we're so excited in our work to now have partnerships with someone like you, Vanna. And Vanna, of course, carries the lion's share of the work because she meets the students privately, she does the screeners, she talks with parents, she then even drives kids that have done the program over here so that they know where to go. So we're very, very grateful to partner with you. And so speaking of trauma, Vanna has quite a lot to say about trauma, and we wanted to hear her story. All the time we've been working for her the past 2 years, we didn't really get to hear this because they don't tell us everything you want to hear right now. But does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
I don't really have a question, but I'm trying to make a comment. It sounds like one of the things that has benefited you most from your experience is that you have an enormous sense of gratitude towards some of the resources that you were given, like you focus on the positive things that have happened to you more so than the negative things. From this brief speech that I'm listening to, it seems that way. And is that something that you carry with you? Like, is that something that you pass on to the kids that you work with?
Oh
Or
yes,
have
I
you
do. I
identified-
see that, like you said, I have so much, even though I have so much of the negativity and the experience structure I went through, a hardship, but at the same time, I also gain a lot of resource and support. And is that I use to overweight that piece. Yes, it's true. And then with these kids, that's what we talk about, that we want to support them, encourage them to use the other thought, the other positive, the things that they have that's positive about their life, their strength, in other words, to use that to hold them up high and to go on.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Well, we can go on, and then at the end, you may have thought of things you want to discuss, so then we'll invite you to talk with us later. Maybe,
Thank you, Vanna.
Thank you, Vanna.